Welcome to the TwinWest Chamber of Commerce January Legislative Breakfast Program. My name is Mike Lehman. I'm the Facility Development Manager for Ferguson Enterprises, and I'm also the Chair-elect for the TwinWest Board of Directors. As many of you know, TwinWest is a vibrant organization run by an active and committed board of directors. And so I'd like to take just a moment to recognize our board members who are here today. Would you please stand and be recognized? And before we get to our program, I ask that you please turn off your cell phones or put them on vibrate or silent, except for tweeting. Remember, we're in this age now where we encourage tweeting, and our hashtag TwinWest is what you would use. Again, Wednesday night sessions preview dinner, Tom Hauser, if you recall, got up there and said he's contractually obligated to tweet, and he took a picture. I thought he was kidding. And I was sitting next to Brian McLeod, and he showed me that, no, he really was sending out a tweet right there. So, I mean, I'm just a little behind the times on all that. So anyways, thank you. Normally our program begins with our legislator question of the day, sponsor recognition, business ballot results, and then our featured presentation. However, today we're going to change things up a bit to accommodate our esteemed panel members who have another engagement to attend right after they're part of today's program. The Metropolitan School Districts Association has a session preview program this morning as well. So we greatly appreciate them making the time to join us today with your extremely busy schedules. And we will have beginning of session this, as a result of the beginning of session this last Tuesday. At this time, I would like to invite our panel members to join us on stage as we look into what the 2013 legislative session holds in store for the business community. So would our senators and representatives please come up at this time, and then I'll introduce you and we'll acknowledge them all at once when I've gone through this. Senator Bach, if you would join us too. Unless I'm rushing you, okay, you take your time, you get done with the breakfast presentation. And Senate Majority Leader Tom Bach from Cook. Of course, with the 2012 elections, we're all aware that the DFL took control again of the Minnesota House and Senate, and Senator Tom Bach returns today as the Senate Majority Leader this session. He was first elected to the House in 1994 and re-elected in 96, 98, and 2000. Then he was elected to the Senate in 2002 and re-elected in 2006, 10, and of course just a few months ago in 2012. He's a retired labor official and received his education at the University of Minnesota, Duluth. Senate Minority Leader David Hahn from Eden Prairie. Senator Hahn was elected by his caucus to serve, of course, as Senate Minority Leader. First elected in 2002 and re-elected in 6, 10, and just recently in 12. He is a business process consultant and received his Bachelor's of Arts degree from Gustavus Adolphus College and graduate studies at the University of Chicago. Speaker of the House, Paul Thiessen. Speaker Thiessen was just awarded the Politics in Minnesota 2012 Legislator of the Year, so congratulations. Democrats regained control of the House, of course, in 2012, and Speaker Thiessen was first elected to the House in 2002 and re-elected in 2004, 2006, 2010, and 2012. He is an attorney, received his undergraduate from Harvard University and his law degree from the University of Chicago. And then we're hoping that House Minority Leader Kurt Doubt still shows up. He lives, of course, in Crown, and I don't know where that sits. I know it's up near Cambridge, and the ice situation, I'm not sure what happened there. So we're missing him. He, of course, is in his second term. First was elected to the House in 2010, re-elected in 2012, and now has been elected House Minority Leader. He attended the University of North Dakota, so give you that information in case, and let's hope he shows up. So anyways, please join me in a warm TwinWest welcome for our esteemed panel members. Thank you all for joining us. Let's get started with what issues will be talked about early in the session. So I think I'll start with Senator Tom Bach, as usual.
Well, first, thank you for being here today, and thank you for the process that you went through in actually endorsing candidates for the legislature. And I know, thank you for the process you went through in screening and endorsing candidates for the legislature. I mean, the fact that you recognized the value contribution and the hard work that people like Senator Bonoff and Senator Rest have put into serving you at the legislature, I think speaks a lot for your organization. Oftentimes business organizations get more of a partisan bent to them, and frankly that makes after the election more difficult for those of us that are leaders, as we have to try mend some hard feelings when members come to the legislature, when sometimes the position you take doesn't prevail in the election. So thanks for having a process and being willing to support both Republicans and Democrats. I think that's critically important to the success of your organization. The first work of the state Senate will be, there are, I believe, about 16 commissioners that the governor has appointed that under the Constitution, the Senate is required to give advice and consent on governor's appointments. So starting next week, all the appropriate committees will start to have some hearings on all of those commissioners, send those recommendations up to the floor of the Senate, and the Senate will either accept or reject all of the governor's commissioners. For some reason, over the last 2 years, the Republican Senate didn't get around to actually, I think most of them had committee hearings, but for some reason they didn't get taken up on the floor. So there's some unfinished business from the last 2 years that we need to clean up first. And then on the 22nd of January, the governor will unveil his budget proposal to the legislature. We then will start taking all of the different pieces of the budget, having hearings on it through all the appropriate committees, taking public testimony on the governor's budget about what the impacts on Minnesotans would be. And that probably leads us up to the February forecast, last week of February, first week of March, where we'll get the most current projections on how much revenue we're going to raise, what they project spending to be, and then the legislature will really roll up their sleeves and start putting a budget together to present to the governor.
Okay.
And hopefully we'll go home on like the 20th of May or 21st, whatever there's a constitutional date we have to go home by.
Thank you. Senator Hahn.
Well, thank you for having us here this morning, and I do feel a little bit like coming back to familiar territory. I've been a member of TwinWest since I was elected to the Senate in 2002, so it's always great to be here. I've been here for many of the legislative breakfasts. I think TwinWest does a great job. In my opinion, one of the more active chambers, and certainly I think has done a great job of informing your membership and keeping us over in the legislature informed of where the chamber is on various positions. So thank you for that. And I think Senator Bach has outlined briefly where the initial work of the legislature is going to be focused. I think until you get to the February forecast, it's hard to get into the actual work of putting the budget together, which will be the primary work of the legislature. I did want to make a little comment about the commissioners that Senator Bach pointed out. It is true that in the last 2 years there were a number of commissioners that did not get confirmed in the Senate. Not unusual. In Governor Pawlenty's 8 years, I think there were a number of commissioners that never got confirmed. So that thing happens. Those things happen. It's just part of the process. So I suspect we'll see a number of commissioners that didn't get their confirmation hearings completed in the first 2 years of Governor Dayton's term. We'll see those things happen here in the next couple of years. But I do think there are a number of important pieces of legislation that have been talked about. Some have been introduced. Probably likely have some hearings on those things going into the initial part of the session. I think certainly the health care issues, the exchange and so forth are going to be things that will be talked about. The governor's indicated those will be on a fast track in his agenda. So we'll see some of those things happen before we complete the work of the budget or get into that too far.
Okay. Representative Thiessen?
I really can just say what they said, because that pretty much is it. I mean, the budget is going to be the kind of the first and foremost thing that we're going to be concentrating on, and that is really the job of this session, and that's where our top priority is going to be. I think in the early weeks we will be seeing work on the health insurance exchange because there's a rapid deadline coming up. I also anticipate that we'll take up some tax conformity issues for at least 2012, so people, as they're getting their taxes done for this year, you know, in the January 1st fiscal cliff discussion, there were some changes made to federal tax law that I think would be helpful for a lot of businesses and individuals in the state if we can conform Minnesota tax law, at least for this year, so that they're doing, so that it's easier and more efficient and makes more sense. And then I actually think that there's going to be some good policy discussions going on even before the February forecast comes out that I think are on items that can move our state forward. You know, our priorities this year as we're going forward, in addition to the budget, really is going to be focused in on education, and particularly on early childhood and higher education. We think that those are the two places in particular that we can really move our state forward for the long term in terms of building broad prosperity for folks. And so we're going to be paying a lot of attention there. But I should back up to the beginning, I suppose, and thank you as well for having us and for your engagement in this process, because we, you know, at the legislature, we're citizen legislators. We don't have expertise on most of the things that we're dealing with, and so your voices over at the Capitol are really, really, really important. So thanks for being here and being part of that.
Okay, thank you. And House Minority Leader Kurt Dowd. Kurt, just to bring you up to speed, we've already introduced you and given a little bit about your background. Welcome. We didn't know if the ice was causing problems or not. But the question simply is your top priority as a caucus leader, and will you accomplish that goal?
Thank you very much, and certainly a pleasure to be here with you this morning. Apologize about my slight tardiness. The traffic was a bit of a problem. Yeah, I think it sounds like maybe we all agree this morning, so it should be a fairly smooth session. So, and if you believe that, I've got some land to sell you. No, I think that the House Republicans, our priority is going to be the budget. We feel like we did a great job over the last couple of years putting some policies in place that have really improved Minnesota's economy. The numbers bear that out, and we think that everything's headed in the right direction. We feel that it's a fragile recovery, and that we might upset the apple cart if we're increasing taxes and throwing things in that are going to cause problems to that recovery. So we want to be involved. Obviously, we've got a new role. We are going to be only as relevant as a couple of these guys are going to allow us to be, I think. But my members are going to come to the table and roll up their sleeves and get to work. And we think that that's what's going to be most productive and give us an ability to be as effective as we can be in the minority. So my hope is that when we disagree, we can be respectful, and hopefully we can accomplish good things together. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next question will start with Senator Han, and this has to do with the taxes and everything that's been going on. So this is the question. Governor Dayton has not been shy about his desire to increase taxes on high-income earners in Minnesota, our job creators. This concerns many in the business community, as a large number are subject to pass-through taxation. What is your position on this tax increase, and what do you believe our state should do going forward regarding revenue shortfalls, deficits, and future spending?
Well, I obviously have not seen what the governor is going to propose this session, but excuse me, you are right. He has in the past and certainly campaigned on the idea that we need significantly higher tax rates on income. I think it's safe to say members of our caucus don't agree with that position. 2 years ago, when we came into the majority, we had a very severe deficit, $6 billion or so. The argument at that point was we needed to have the high tax rates to generate the revenue to deal with that. The House and the Senate elected not to do that. We tried to restrain the growth in spending. We did put together a budget to reflect that without raising tax rates. We did have a protracted debate about how to solve that budget. There was a shutdown as a result for a few days, and we reached a compromise at the end of that period of time. But we did not raise the tax rates. The result has been that revenues have gone up. The state has seen increased revenues come into the Treasury. The spending has been lower than what we anticipated, and so we've generated, in effect, what are called surpluses, and we've seen some recovery to our improvement in budget position. So our position has been that what we've done in the past 2 years is the prudent course, that we should not be adding additional tax rate increases to the producers and to the people who are generating jobs, but instead we ought to manage our budget to be, make our spending to fall in the range of what revenues we have. We think that is the prudent course. We have to remember that the best way to generate revenue for the state is not increasing tax rates, but increasing the growth of the economy, and that's what we believe is the most important thing to do.
Thank you. Representative Thiessen.
Well, this is what our work is going to be all about as we go forward here. And so I guess I would say on the larger question of the, and then we can get to the pass-through income just briefly, but I mean, kind of the facts, and we can debate what's happened over the last 2 years, over the last 10 years, really. I mean, this is not necessarily a partisan issue because it's been true of both parties, but we have not balanced our budget in a way that's honest and transparent for at least a decade. We've used tricks and gimmicks and accounting shifts and a whole variety of things, borrowing from the schools over the last 10 years. So first and foremost, what we really want to do is get a budget that is going to be truly balanced going forward and provide us stability in the future, because from my perspective, where I think that the state can make additional investments in things like transportation and education and healthcare and providing a safety net in the future, we can't do those things until we first get our budget balanced. And so that's kind of the way I see that. That's why that's our first and foremost job. So there'll be cuts as part of this budget that we'll have to be focused in on and continue some of the work that has gone forward on a bipartisan basis on bringing more efficiencies and effectiveness to the way we deliver services so we can deliver the same services for less cost. So that's going to be a key focus going forward. But the fact of the matter is we do have $1 billion plus state budget deficit. We owe our schools another $1 billion on top of that that's been borrowed over time in various chunks that needs to be paid back as well. And so we're going to, so we're starting with kind of a deficit hole that we need to fill. And then on top of that, I think that the governor is going to be focused in on, and we are, as I said before, there are certain areas where I think additional state investment makes some sense, like early childhood education, which has a long-term payoff, like higher education, which I think is the key to our competing in the global economy over the next several years, like transportation infrastructure. So as we look at those things and we kind of see this budget hole we have, maybe some additional investments that part we can pay for by reducing expenditures elsewhere, I think we also need to look at the revenue side. I think tax reform is going to be a big part of this discussion, and some of that will involve lowering certain types of taxes, I hope, and things I think where we're going to get agreement around the corporate tax rates and property taxes in particular is something that we heard a lot about and campaigned a lot about leading up to the last election. We'd like to provide some property tax relief for business and for homeowners. In that context, we also need then to balance out our budget. And the governor has been very clear about his position, as you noted, that a higher income, raising rates on higher income or doing other things like eliminating loopholes that, at some level so it phases out for higher incomes, addressing the kind of unfairness that he sees, and I personally see in our tax system from that perspective, will certainly be part of the discussion. But I think the important thing is it's part of the larger tax reform discussion so that we have a tax system that actually works for 21st century Minnesota. We haven't done this in a generation. I think that's what our focus ought to be. As to the pass-through taxation, I mean, this is clearly an issue. I think up to 80% of small businesses pay our S-corps and pay through the individual income tax. At the levels that the governor is talking about, though, it probably affects maybe 10 to 15% of those businesses, and we need to address that. And there may be ways that we can do that as part of this tax discussion. But at the end of the day, it seems to me that what we ultimately want to do, and this is kind of what this last election was about, what we ultimately want to do is make sure our tax system, when I talk about tax fairness, it's really about making sure that the burden of our tax system and our state budget doesn't fall on middle-class families. And it has been over the last 10 years more and more and more. And that's just the reality that we've faced. And so as we look at tax reform, that's going to be the lens through which we look at it. Is it going to put an additional burden on middle-class families through their property taxes and through other things? Or are we going to have a system that's continued kind of to drive this economic wedge between people? And so I think it's going to be an interesting discussion. We have a real opportunity to make some progress in this area, and we want to put a budget in place first and foremost that's going to last our state for the long term and be durable.
Okay, Representative Dowd.
Thank you. You know, I said recently numerous times that and actually Tina Smith quoted me at the chamber dinner the other night. As the DFL is putting policies forward, I think we need to ask ourselves, is this a policy that's going to help Minnesota? Is it going to help middle-class Minnesotans? Is it going to help middle-class Minnesotans find better jobs? And is it going to make Minnesota more competitive for job creators? And I think this is a good example of something that will not have that impact. And there's been a long discussion in Minnesota about, you know, do we need to raise more revenue or deal with the spending? And you know, the DFL has talked about a balanced approach over the last few years. Right now, there's a lot of discussion heavy on one side of that, which is increasing taxes and raising revenue. I think that the policies that we put in place over the last couple of years show that the economy's headed in the right direction. We're going to have $1.7 billion more money this biennium to spend than we did in the last. That's more revenue. Revenues, you know, we just got the January report here yesterday. I think I had it in my email inbox. Again, $114 million, I think, revenues exceeding projections. So revenues are coming in above projections. Why? Not because we increased taxes, because the economy is growing. And we feel that that's a better way to increase revenues than increasing taxes. You can get the opposite effect by increasing taxes. So, you know, I know there's a deficit to deal with this next biennium. It's $1.1 billion. It was $4.4 billion that same biennium 2 years ago. Okay, we took a $6.2 billion deficit and turned it into what now is a $2.5 billion surplus. We did all that without raising taxes. So what we need to look at is, are the decisions we're making going to be helpful, or are they ultimately going to have the wrong effect on the economy? And the policies we put in place over the last couple of years have helped. Unemployment, 7% 2 years ago. Today it's 5.9. The Secretary of State released a report 2 days ago that said they had an 18% increase in the number of business filings last year. 55,000 new jobs created last year in Minnesota by you guys. So the economy's headed in the right direction. We need to make sure we don't drive that train off the tracks here. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Senator Bach, 30 seconds. No, just kidding. Just kidding.
I noticed they were a little long. You know, I mean, first let me say, let's just have an honest conversation with Minnesotans about where we are. And that is critically important to me because I believe in this state. And I believe if Minnesotans know the facts, they are going to come to the right conclusion. And none of us at this table have had anything to do with this economic recovery coming out of the Great Recession. Let's just quit breaking our arms on our backs that somehow we're responsible for this very anemic economic growth coming out of this recession. And I just have to tell you, whether it is in your business, in your home, at the church you go to, if you are always managing a crisis, you cannot make good decisions about the future. And you never have any money to invest in things that are important. And that is where the state has found itself, going back to 2002, in this constant state of crisis management. It's not serving our citizens well, it's not serving our business community well. Example, we're going to do significant tax reform in this session, and it's going to be linked very closely to the budget discussions. I don't know what the governor's going to propose. I don't know what the state senate is going to propose at this point. But I can tell you two things are certain, and then we should have a conversation about what do the other pieces look like. At the end of the day, the higher income wage earners in the state are going to have a higher tax rate. Okay, let's all just get our arms around that. That's going to happen. The governor's made that very clear. Now we can talk about what the rate might be and where the income threshold might be so that we don't have some negative impact on our economy, so that we don't hurt recruitment of, you know, we have Fortune 500 companies that are competing globally for top-level executives, and we don't want to put anything in the way of that kind of recruitment. So let's just talk about, let's just admit something's going to happen there. What should the rate be? What should the threshold be that will work for Minnesota? The other thing I think that people need to accept is this tax reform is going to raise revenue. It's not going to be revenue neutral. Now, I've made that very clear with David Olson and his team of people that work at the state capitol. And some taxes are going to go up, some are going to go down, and you'll be able to talk about it and spin it however you want after May when we go home. But I can tell you, I have a couple of priorities, and I'm not the tax chair. But I think we are getting an over-reliance on property taxes to fund things that are important to our citizens. That piece of the state's revenue system has been growing too fast. In 2002, our property taxes in Minnesota were about $4 billion. This year, they're 8.5. They have more than doubled. And part of the reason that has happened, a large part of the reason that has happened, is the state has not been a good enough partner, not a strong enough partner with our local units of government, cities, counties, schools, where most of the services get delivered. The state has to be a stronger partner with them. Their only option is to go to the property tax. So if we abandon them and tell them, you figure out how to put money into your school by yourself, as a state legislature, we're not going to help you. They only have one option, and that's to go to the voter-approved levy. And not only is it not good education policy because it's creating huge funding disparities all over the state, as some districts have 1,800 a pupil, and we've got about 40 districts in the state that have 0 because for a number of different reasons they can't pass voter-approved levies. Tax reform is a huge conversation that's going to be linked to the budget. I can just tell you, I would like to find a way to bring down the corporate tax rate. I mean, I don't believe it's going to lead to some panacea of economic growth in this state, because the real effective rate the businesses really pay is not the statutory rate of 9.8, it's something much less, depending on who you are. But if we're going to bring it down, and I'm telling you I support that, I think the governor supports that, I think you'll see something in his budget that likely does that, we have to figure out how we replace the revenue. So maybe we do it with a higher income tax on high wage earners, maybe we do it with something relative to a sales tax expansion, maybe we do it with looking at the foreign royalty subtraction, where our companies that operate globally can bring money back here and 80% of it is tax-free. Maybe the better use of that, rather than allowing them to do that, is to actually lower the corporate rate for all of the businesses, not just those that work globally. Those are the kind of conversations I think we're going to have, and they're very closely linked to the conversations on the budget. But there are a couple things that people are going to have to accept. It's going to raise revenue to solve these long-term structural problems that we've had, and there's going to be some additional revenue from the higher wage earners in the state.
Okay, thank you. I think we could spend the whole hour just on that topic, which we won't. We'll talk about something a little easier. How about health reform? Still a great deal of confusion. Oh, out of respect, though, really, what time does the panel have to? Okay. Still a great deal of confusion, concern about the federal health care reforms in the business community. Minnesota is in the midst of establishing and enacting its own health care exchange. What issues will come up this session regarding health care reform, the Minnesota exchange, and what will be the impacts to the business community? Representative Thiessen, start with you, please.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think first off, the most important thing is there will be a health insurance exchange established here in Minnesota, and it's going to be on a relatively fast track because there's a March 31st federal deadline for getting the exchange legislation through. And there's already been quite a bit of work done, but I only say that because right now, just as of yesterday, the initial bill to establish the health insurance exchange was introduced in the legislature, and it really is that. It's an initial draft. And so over the next 2 months, your this is the time for you to engage on that issue, because I anticipate by the middle of March, the legislation will be kind of in its final form and getting passed. And so now is the time to engage in that. I think this actually presents us with a very exciting opportunity in the state of Minnesota. We just had a panel for legislators at the Humphrey Institute at the University of Minnesota earlier this week on Wednesday. And there was a representative that worked with President Bush's Secretary of Health and Human Services, and then the person who first worked for President Obama on the exchange. And both of them emphasized over and over again, the most important message they had for us is make sure that the state does this. Do not default to the federal government. Do not let the federal government take over health care and the health insurance exchange, because then you lose all of your leverage. And so we are going to proceed with establishing a Minnesota-based healthcare insurance exchange. We are leaders in healthcare in this state. It's going to, basically what it does is provide a marketplace for people to go and shop for their healthcare. In fact, there's health exchanges out there right now in the private sector. I mean, Medica has what essentially is a health insurance exchange just for their products right now. What this will do is, consolidate more products. There's a lot of issues around governance and other things that need to be ironed out, but at the end of the day, the health insurance exchange needs to just be a tool toward larger health care reform that's actually going on right now in the private sector. And that's how we changing the way we're paying for and delivering health care services. And so we're not paying for people to treat their sickness, but actually to pay providers and others to keep them well. And that is happening in the marketplace without regard to Obamacare, without regard to the health insurance exchange. I think the health insurance exchange can be a lever to help us in Minnesota move forward and get ahead of the curve even farther than we already are on the changes that are already happening in the private marketplace. I think it's a really exciting opportunity for us, and we just need to do it well and do it right. And the only way we're going to do that is for you to engage, for Republicans and Democrats to actually engage in doing this instead of just standing up and saying, no, I refuse to do that, and kind of punting it to the federal government.
Okay. Representative Dowd.
Thank you. Obviously, this is something that's going to be a big issue, and as the speaker said, something we'll probably see early on in the session. We really want to come to the table and work on this. I know I had a couple of my members that were at the press conference the other day. They've signed on to the bill. They indicated to me they don't like the bill the way it is right now, and they wouldn't vote for it if it comes in this form. But I think it indicates our willingness to be at the table and to try to move this legislation in a direction that we can live with, and something that's going to work for Minnesotans. Obviously, there's some costs involved with this that are a bit concerning. I think the numbers are $336 million, if I remember, to implement this before 2016, and then about $56 million a year after that. That cost, and especially in an environment where healthcare costs already are high, or people perceive that they're high, those costs are being paid by these premiums on these healthcare plans. So we're increasing costs to pay for the administration of this, and we need to see that there's going to be some benefits and that this is going to be beneficial to Minnesotans. But our hope is that we can move this in a more market-driven direction, and also I think we've got some concerns about the oversight of this and making sure that we've got the right oversight on this board, rather than just appointed non-elected people making decisions on eligibility. I think there's some concerns the way the legislation is currently written, but we hope to be at the table and hope to come up with a product that's going to work for everybody. And I think actually this is one of the things that I've been telling media recently is look for this as an early indicator in the session to see how well people are going to work together. And moreover, not just, I've pledged that the Republicans are going to be at the table working on this, but are the Democrats going to kind of go their own way on this, or are we really going to be bipartisan? And my hope is that we're going to be bipartisan on this. So I would look for this as an early indicator in the session to whether or not this is going to be bipartisan legislation or whether it's going to pass along party lines. So thank you.
Thank you. Senator Bach.
Well, in the Senate, we announced yesterday that this was going to be Senate file number one, our number one priority. And that's not to say that the state budget isn't the number one priority, but it's hard to introduce a bill that says state budget. So, and we have to wait for the governor to lead on that, but outside of the budget, getting this work on the exchange done and on the governor's desk by the end of March is going to be a very aggressive